Zara adjusted her hijab in the mirror, loosening it slightly to allow the evening breeze to cool her neck. Outside, the gardens of her family estate stretched toward the horizon, bursting with the colors of early summer. Through the window, she could see him, Ahmad, tending to the roses her father had imported from Damascus. His movements were deliberate, almost meditative, as he pruned away dead branches and cleared space for new growth. At 32, Zara had grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her through the halls of her family home, through the university where she taught literature, through the social gatherings her mother still insisted she attend. Too educated to be a proper wife, too independent, too much of her father's daughter. She had heard all the criticisms, spoken and unspoken, and had built her life around them, or perhaps in spite of them. 3 months ago, her father had hired Ahmad to transform their already impressive gardens into something extraordinary. A gift for your mother, he had said, something to keep her occupied while I'm traveling. But Zara suspected the gardens were as much for her as they were for her mother. After her broken engagement last year, her father seemed determined to create a sanctuary for her on the estate, a place where she could retreat from the disappointments of the outside world. Ahmad had arrived with nothing but a worn leather bag and a reputation that preceded him. At 35, he had already designed gardens for some of the wealthiest families in Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Zara's father had been fortunate to secure his services, a fact he mentioned frequently to anyone who would listen. Zara had paid little attention to the new gardener at first. Her life was consumed with her research, her teaching, and the careful dance of managing her mother's expectations while maintaining her independence. But as the weeks passed, she had found herself increasingly drawn to the windows overlooking the garden, watching as Ahmad coaxed life from the soil with a patience and care she found mesmerizing. Today, she had a reason to speak with him. Her father had called from London, asking her to convey his newest vision for the eastern section of the garden, a collection of water features inspired by the ancient gardens of Alhambra. Zara had taken detailed notes, knowing that her father's instructions would be precise and non-negotiable. She tucked her phone into the pocket of her long linen dress and made her way downstairs, nodding politely to Malik, the housekeeper who had been with their family since Zara was a child. I'm going to speak with the gardener about father's new plans, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Malik's eyes crinkled with the hint of a smile. Take him some tea, then. The poor man has been working since dawn. Zara hesitated, then nodded. It was just past 6 in the evening, and the heat of the day was finally beginning to subside. Good idea. I'll bring it out myself. Your mother is resting, Malik added. She had a headache after her lunch with Mrs. Bahri. Of course she did, Zara said, unable to keep the wryness from her tone. Her mother's lunches with the neighborhood gossips inevitably led to migraines, especially when the conversation turned to Zara's unmarried status. In the kitchen, Zara prepared the tea herself, selecting her father's premium blend and adding just a touch of mint from the herb garden. She arranged the teapot and a single cup on a silver tray, then reconsidered and added a second cup. She would join him, she decided. After all, her father's plans were complex, and it would be easier to explain them over tea. The gardens were Zara's favorite part of the estate. As a child, she had spent countless hours reading beneath the ancient olive trees or studying the intricate patterns of the traditional Islamic geometric designs her grandfather had incorporated into the original layout. Now, under Ahmad's care, the gardens were evolving into something even more extraordinary, a blend of traditional elements and contemporary sustainable practices that captured both the past and the future. Ahmad was kneeling beside a rose bush when she approached, his hands moving with a surgeon's precision as he removed the spent blooms. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, surprise briefly crossing his face before he stood. wiping his hands on a cloth tucked into his belt. "Miss Zara," he said, his voice deep and melodious. "Is there something you need?" Zara held up the tray. "Tea," she said, "and information from my father about his plans for the eastern section." Ahmad's eyebrows arose slightly, but he gestured toward a stone bench positioned beneath a flowering almond tree. "Please," he said. "Shall we sit?" Zara nodded, placing the tray on the bench between them. As she poured the tea, she was acutely aware of Ahmad's presence, the earthy scent of soil and sweat that clung to him, the way his calloused fingers carefully accepted the delicate porcelain cup, the respectful distance he maintained, even in the intimacy of the moment. "My father called from London," she began, her eyes fixed on the swirling steam rising from her cup. "He wants to expand the plans for the eastern section to include water features, reflecting pools, a series of small fountains, perhaps even a modest recreation of the Court of the Lions from Alhambra." Ahmad sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Ambitious," he said after a moment, "but not impossible. The eastern section catches the morning light beautifully. Water features there would create remarkable reflections." "You've been to Alhambra?" Zara asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. A small smile tugged at the corner of Ahmad's mouth. "Many times. Before I came back to work in the Middle East, I spent 3 years studying historic Islamic gardens in Spain. Alhambra was—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Transformative." "I've only seen it in books," Zara admitted. "For my doctoral research, I studied the poetry of Ibn Zamrak that's carved into the walls there." Ahmad's eyes widened slightly. "You're familiar with Ibn Zamrak? His poetry is extraordinary, isn't it? The way he captures the relationship between water and light, between the earthly and the divine." "I am a garden adorned by beauty," Zara quoted softly. "Beholding my loveliness, you will know the extent of my splendor." For a long moment they sat in silence, the quoted verse hanging in the air between them. Zara felt a peculiar tightness in her chest, a sensation she couldn't quite name. "Your father mentioned you were a professor," Ahmad said finally, his voice gentle. "But he didn't say your specialty was medieval Arabic poetry." Zara smiled. "My father prefers to focus on the practical applications of my education. Literature is lovely, but it doesn't necessarily lead to a suitable marriage." The words escaped before she could stop them, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Ahmad's expression remained carefully neutral, but she thought she detected a flash of something, understanding perhaps, in his dark eyes. "Practical applications can be overrated," he said after a moment. "Beauty has its own purpose." Zara found herself studying his face, the strong line of his jaw beneath several days' worth of stubble, the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, the streak of soil on his left cheek that he hadn't noticed. There was an intelligence in his gaze that she hadn't expected, a depth that contradicted her initial impression of him as merely another employee of her father's. "I've taken up enough of your time," she said suddenly, gathering the cups and placing them back on the tray. "I'll ask my father to send you the detailed plans directly." Ahmad stood as she did, his movements fluid despite the long day of physical labor. "Thank you for the tea," he said. "And for the poetry. It's not often I have the opportunity to discuss Ibn Zamrak while pruning roses." Zara hesitated, then said, "Perhaps we could discuss it again sometime." "The poetry, I mean, if you're interested." Ahmad's smile was warm but cautious. "I would enjoy that very much, Miss Zara." As she walked back toward the house, the tea tray balanced carefully in her hands. Zara could feel his eyes on her back. She resisted the urge to turn around, to see if his expression matched the warmth in his voice. Instead, she focused on her steps, on the familiar path that led from the garden to the house, from the unexpected to the expected. It's not appropriate, her mother had said, watching from the window as Zara knelt in the dirt beside Ahmad, carefully placing the delicate roots into the prepared soil. The neighbors will talk. Let them, Zara had replied, her hands covered in rich earth. Father hired him for his expertise. I'm merely learning from him. But she knew it was more than that. In Ahmad's company, she felt a freedom she rarely experienced elsewhere. He spoke to her as an equal, neither intimidated by her education nor dismissive of her ideas. Their conversations ranged from poetry to philosophy, from the mathematical precision of Islamic garden design to the politics of water conservation. And always, there is a current of something more, an unspoken connection that grew stronger with each passing day. Today, she had brought him lunch, a simple meal of stuffed grape leaves, fresh bread, and apricots from the tree that grew near the kitchen. They sat beneath the shade of an ancient olive tree, their shoulders not quite touching as they ate in companionable silence. Your father called this morning, Ahmad said finally, wiping his hands on a cloth. He'll be home next week. Zara nodded, a strange combination of emotions washing over her. She loved her father dearly, but his return would mean an end to these quiet moments in the garden, these conversations that had become the highlight of her days. He'll be pleased with your progress, she said, gesturing toward the eastern section where the framework for the first reflecting pool was already taking shape. You've accomplished so much in such a short time. Ahmad's gaze followed hers, his expression thoughtful. It helps to have something worth working toward. Zara felt her heartbeat quicken at the way his eyes returned to her face, lingering for just a moment before looking away. They had been careful, so careful, to maintain the appropriate boundaries. But in moments like these, the boundaries seemed to blur, to become as fluid as the water features they were discussing. Ahmad, she began, unsure of what she wanted to say, but knowing she needed to say something. I dot. Miss Zara, Miss Zara. The voice of Tariq, the young boy who helped with household errands, cut through the moment. He was running toward them, waving his arms with the excitement only a 10-year-old could muster. Your mother is looking for you everywhere. The Nasir family has arrived for lunch, and you're not ready. Zara closed her eyes briefly, stifling a groan. The Nasirs. Of course. Her mother had mentioned their visit, but Zara had deliberately pushed it from her mind. Mrs. Nasir had a son, Kareem, who had recently returned from studying abroad. Unmarried, successful, and dulled from a good family. Her mother's latest attempt at matchmaking. Tell my mother I'll be right there, she said to Tariq, gathering the remains of their lunch. I just need to freshen up. As the boy ran back toward the house, Zara turned to Ahmad, an apology on her lips. But before she could speak, he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair that had escaped her hijab back into place. His fingertips barely grazed her cheek, but the touch sent a shock through her entire body. You should go, he said softly. Your mother is waiting. Zara nodded, unable to form words. She rose unsteadily to her feet, clutching the lunch basket as if it were a lifeline. Ahmad stood as well, his height making him tower over her. Zara, he said, dropping the formal miss for the first time. Be careful. She wasn't sure if he was warning her about the Nasir family, about her mother's matchmaking, or about the dangerous territory they were entering together. Perhaps all three. She managed a small nod before turning to walk back to the house, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. The lunch with the Nasir family was exactly as Zara had expected, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to showcase her as a potential daughter-in-law. Her mother had insisted she wear her newest dress, a deep blue that brought out her eyes, and had arranged for the cook to prepare all of Kareem's favorite dishes. Kareem himself was pleasant enough, educated, well-traveled, and conventionally handsome. In another life, Zara might have been interested, but now, as she sat across from him at the dining table, making polite conversation about his experiences in London, she found herself comparing him to Ahmad. Where Karim was smooth and polished, Ahmad was authentic and unvarnished. Where Karim spoke with practiced charm, Ahmad's words carried the weight of genuine thought and feeling. "And what about you, Zahra?" Karim asked, interrupting her thoughts. "Your mother tells me you teach literature at the university. That must be fascinating." Zahra forced herself to focus on the conversation. "It is," she said. "I specialize in medieval Arabic poetry, particularly works from Al-Andalus." Spain?" Karim nodded. "I spent a summer in Barcelona during my studies. Beautiful city, though I must admit I spent more time at the beach than in museums." Zara smiled politely, resisting the urge to mention that Barcelona had little to do with the Islamic golden age of Al-Andalus. Instead, she asked about his work in international finance, a topic that seemed to please both him and her mother. As the meal progressed, Zara found her gaze drifting toward the window toward the garden where Ahmad would be working. The eastern section was visible from the dining room, and she could just make out his figure moving among the half-finished structures of the water features. Even at this distance, she recognized the careful precision of his movements, the deliberate way he approached each task. "The gardens are looking lovely," Mrs. Nasir commented, following Zara's gaze. "Your new gardener must be quite skilled." "He is," Zara's mother agreed. Hadi found him through a connection in Jordan. Apparently, he's quite well known in certain circles. He studied at the Royal Botanical Gardens in London, Zara heard herself say. And he spent time researching historical Islamic gardens throughout Spain and North Africa. Her mother gave her a sharp look. "I wasn't aware you knew so much about the gardener's background, Zara." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Father mentioned it," she said, the lie coming easily to her lips. "He was quite impressed with his credentials." The conversation moved on, but Zara could feel her mother's eyes on her, watchful and concerned. She kept her own gaze firmly on her plate for the remainder of the meal, engaging with Karim's stories about financial markets with a feigned interest that fooled everyone but herself. After lunch, as the Nasirs prepared to leave, Karim asked if he might call on her again. Zara hesitated, aware of her mother's expectant gaze. "Of course," she said finally, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. "That would be nice." As soon as the Nasir's car had disappeared down the driveway, her mother turned to her, eyes bright with excitement. "He likes you," she said, clasping her hands together. "I could tell. And such a good family, Zara. His father's connections alone." "Mother," Zara interrupted gently, "please don't get ahead of yourself. It was just lunch." Her mother's smile faltered slightly. "But you said he could call on you again." "Out of politeness," Zara said, already moving toward the stairs. "I need to prepare for my lectures tomorrow. Please excuse me." In the sanctuary of her room, Zara stood at the window gazing out at the garden. Ahmad was still there, his form silhouetted against the setting sun as he worked on the framework for one of the reflecting pools. Without allowing herself to think too deeply about what she was doing, she changed into a more comfortable dress, readjusted her hijab, and made her way back downstairs and out to the garden. The evening air was cooling rapidly, the heat of the day giving way to a gentle breeze that carried the scent of jasmine and roses. Ahmad looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. "Your guests have left," he said, a statement rather than a question. "Yes," Zara replied, coming to stand beside him at the edge of what would eventually be a reflecting pool. "It was an introduction, I suppose." Ahmad nodded, returning his attention to the wooden framework he was constructing. "He seemed nice," he said carefully. "Your mother looked pleased." Zara felt a flicker of surprise. "You were watching?" Ahmad's hand stilled for a moment before continuing their work. Not intentionally, he said, but the dining room windows faced this section of the garden. It was difficult not to notice. Zara wasn't sure how to respond. The idea that he had been watching her, perhaps feeling the same complicated emotions she had been experiencing, both thrilled and terrified her. He's asked to see me again, she said finally, needing to fill the growing silence between them. Ahmad's movements became more deliberate, more focused. And will you see him? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. I don't know, Zara admitted, her voice barely audible above the sound of the evening birds. My mother hoped so. Ahmad set down his tools and turned to face her fully. In the fading light, his features were softened, his eyes dark and unreadable. And what do you hope for, Zara? The question caught her off guard, though she had been asking herself the same thing all afternoon. What did she hope for? A conventional marriage to a man her parents approved of? A quiet rebellion that would ultimately lead nowhere? Or something else entirely? Something that seemed both impossible and inevitable? I don't know, she said again, looking down at the unfinished pool. I've always thought I knew what I wanted. My teaching, my research, a life of the mind. But lately, I've begun to wonder if that's enough. Ahmad took a step closer to her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. And what has changed? Zara looked up at him, at the face that had become so familiar to her over the past weeks. You know what has changed, she said softly. Or who? Ahmad closed his eyes briefly as if her words had caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, they were filled with a mixture of longing and resignation. Zara, he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. We can't. Why not? She asked, though she knew the answer as well as he did. Because you work for my father? Because your position is different from mine? Because I care about you too much to see you hurt, he interrupted, his voice low and urgent. Because I've seen the way your mother looks at you, the hope she has for you. Because I know what happens when people like us try to cross these lines. People like us, Zara repeated. You mean people who care for each other, people who find in each other something they haven't found elsewhere. Ahmad reached out, his hand hovering near her face, before dropping back to his side. I mean people who come from different worlds, he said gently. Your father hired me to build a garden, Zara. Not to court his daughter. The words stung even though she knew they were true. Is that all this is to you? She asked. A job? No, Ahmad sighed so quickly and firmly that it startled her. No, Zara. This, he gestured between them. This is something I never expected. Something I've tried to resist, believe me. But every day I see you, every conversation we have, every moment we share, it becomes harder to remember all the reasons why it can't be. Zara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Then why fight it, she whispered. Why not see where it leads? Ahmad's smile was sad. Because I've been here before, he said. Because I know the cost. Before she could ask what he meant, the sound of a car engine broke the silence of the evening. Headlights swept across the garden as a familiar black sedan pulled into the driveway. Father, Zara breathed, taking an instinctive step back from Ahmad. He is home early. Ahmad nodded, already moving toward his tools. You should go, he said, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his emotion. Go welcome your father home. Zara hesitated, torn between the familiar pull of family obligation and the new, insistent tug of her heart. We need to talk more, she said. Promise me we'll finish this conversation. Ahmad looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow, he said. After your father has rested, we'll talk tomorrow. Zara turned and hurried toward the house, her mind racing with thoughts of what tomorrow might bring, of conversations yet to be had, of possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. Behind her, Ahmad returned to his work, his hands steady even as his heart was anything but. The return of Zara's father changed the rhythm of the household. Hadi al-Farsi was an imposing man, not just in his physical presence, but in the way he filled a room with his energy and opinions. He had built his shipping business from nothing, a fact he never allowed anyone to forget, and he ran his household with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made his business successful. "The gardens are coming along beautifully," he said the next morning as they sat together for breakfast. "Ahmad has exceeded my expectations." Zara kept her eyes on her plate, afraid that even the mention of Ahmad's name might somehow reveal her feelings. "He's very dedicated," she said carefully. Her father nodded, spreading fig jam on a piece of bread. "I've asked him to stay on permanently," he announced, "not just to complete this project, but to maintain the gardens going forward. He'll move into the old gatehouse at the end of the month." Zara's head snapped up, her heart suddenly racing. "Permanently," she repeated, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Her father gave her a curious look. "Yes," he said. "Is there something wrong with that arrangement?" "No," Zara said quickly. "No, it's just unexpected. I thought this was a temporary project." Her father shrugged. "Good help is hard to find, especially someone with his expertise. Besides, your mother has grown fond of the improvements. It gives her something to show off to her friends." Zara nodded, her mind struggling to process what this meant. Ahmad living on their property permanently, their paths crossing every day, not just for the duration of this project, but indefinitely. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Speaking of your mother," her father continued, his tone shifting slightly, "she tells me you had lunch with Karim Nasir yesterday." Zara sighed inwardly. Of course, her mother had wasted no time in informing her father about the potential match. "Yes," she said. "Mother invited his family while you were away." Her father studied her face, his expression unreadable. "And? What did you think of him?" Zara chose her words carefully. "He seems nice enough, successful, well educated, but," her father prompted, always quick to detect what wasn't being said. "But I don't know him," Zara said, meeting her father's gaze. "One lunch isn't enough to form an opinion about someone I might spend my life with." Her father surprised her by laughing, a deep, genuine sound that she hadn't heard in some time. "Always a logical one," he said, shaking his head. "Just like your grandfather. He would have adored you, you know." Zara smiled, touched by the comparison. Her father's father had been a renowned scholar, a man who had valued education above all else. She had never met him, but her father often told stories of his wisdom and integrity. "I'm not in a rush, father," she said gently. "I enjoy my work, my life here with you and mother." Her father's expression softened. "I know," he said, "and I want you to be happy, Zara. Truly happy. But your mother worries, and I worry too. Not about your marriage status, but about your future, about who will be there for you when we're gone." Zara reached across the table and covered her father's hand with her own. "I'll be fine," she assured him. "I'm stronger than you both think." Her father squeezed her hand, then released it. "I know you are," he said. "You're your father's daughter, after all." He paused, then he added more seriously, "But the heart needs companionship, Zara. Even the strongest heart." The conversation shifted to other topics: her father's business trip, her mother's latest social engagements, the university's upcoming academic conference. But his words stayed with her throughout the day. The heart needs companionship. How would her father feel if he knew that her heart had already found the companionship it sought, in the most unlikely of places. It wasn't until late afternoon that Zara managed to slip away to the garden. Her father had gone to his office in the city, and her mother was resting after a morning of calls and visitors. Zara found Ahmad in the eastern section, working on the first of the reflecting pools. The framework was complete, and he was now lining it with waterproof material, his movements precise and focused. He looked up as she approached, his expression guarded. "Miss Zara," he said formally, nodding in greeting. Zara looked around, confirming they were alone. "Ahmad," she said, dropping the formality. "My father told me this morning that he's asked you to stay on permanently." Ahmad's hand stilled for a moment before continuing their work. "Yes," he said. "He made me the offer yesterday evening." "And you accepted," Zara said, making it a statement rather than a question. Ahmad nodded, setting down his tools and straightening to face her. "I did," he said. "It's a good position, stable, and—" He hesitated, his eyes meeting hers. "And there are reasons I might want to stay." Zara felt her heart beat faster at the implication in his words. "What reasons?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Ahmad took a step closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. "You know why," he said softly. "You've known for weeks now." Zara felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice, about to take a step that would change everything. "Say it," she whispered, Maureen. "Please." Ahmad closed his eyes briefly as if gathering his courage. When he opened them again, they were filled with a certainty that took her breath away. "Because of you," he said simply. "Because every day I spend with you makes me want 1,000 more. Because the thought of leaving you behind is—" He shook his head, unable to find the words. Zara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I feel the same," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every day, every conversation, every moment we share. I've never felt this way before." Ahmad's expression was a mixture of joy and sorrow. "But Zara," he said gently, "feeling this way doesn't change our circumstances. Your father has been generous to me, more than generous. And your mother, she has plans for you that don't include the gardener." "I don't care about her plans," Zara said with sudden fierceness. "I care about what I want, what I feel." Ahmad's smile was sad. "It's not that simple, and you know it," he said. "Your family, your position, your future. These things matter, Zara. They should matter." "They do matter," Zara insisted. "But so do my choices, my happiness." Ahmad reached out, his fingertips just barely brushing against her cheek. "Your happiness is all I want," he said softly. "That's why I need to be careful. That's why we both need to be careful." Before Zara could respond, a voice called from the direction of the house. "Zara, are you out here?" It was her mother, her tone carrying that hint of irritation that suggested she had been looking for a while. Ahmad stepped back immediately, returning to his work with practiced ease. Zara took a deep breath, composing herself before turning to face her mother. "I'm here, Mother," she called back, "just checking on the progress of the reflecting pools." Her mother appeared at the edge of the garden, her expression suspicious as she took in the scene. "Your father called," she said. "He's bringing guests for dinner. You need to help me prepare." Zara nodded, casting one last glance at Ahmad, who was studiously avoiding looking in her direction. "I'll be right there," she said. As she followed her mother back to the house, Zara's mind was racing. Ahmad had all but declared his feelings for her, and she had done the same. But where did that leave them? What path forward could they possibly have, given the expectations placed upon her and the boundaries that separated them? She didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt truly alive. The possibility of love, however complicated, had awakened something in her that she hadn't realized was sleeping. And now that it was awake, she knew she couldn't simply let it drift back into slumber. Whatever happened next, there was no going back to the way things were before. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of stolen moments and careful conversations. Zara and Ahmad found ways to be together that wouldn't arouse suspicion. She would bring him tea in the mornings. He would ask her advice about the placement of certain plants. They would discuss the historical significance of the garden designs they were implementing. To an outside observer, their interactions appeared professional, perhaps friendly, but nothing more. In private, however, in the brief moments when they were sure they wouldn't be interrupted, their conversations deepened, their connection strengthened. Ahmad told her about his childhood in a small village outside Amman, about losing his parents at a young age and being raised by his grandmother, about discovering his love for plants and gardens while working in the fields as a boy. Zara shared her passion for poetry, her dreams of writing a book about the women poets of Al-Andalus, her complicated relationship with her parents' expectations, and always there was the unspoken question hanging between them. What next? How could they possibly build something permanent from these fragile, hidden moments? The answer came unexpectedly on a warm evening in late summer. Zara's father had invited business associates for dinner, and the conversation had turned to the gardens, as it often did these days. You must meet the man behind the transformation, her father was saying to his guests. Ahmad, is he still working, do you think, Zara? Zara, who had been only half listening to the conversation, looked up in surprise. I'm not sure, she said. It's quite late. Her father waved dismissively. Send Tarek to fetch him, he instructed one of the household staff. My friends must see the plans for the final water feature. Zara felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Ahmad had never been invited into the house for a social occasion. He had always been kept firmly in the realm of employee, not guest. This crossing of boundaries, however small, felt significant. When Ahmad arrived, he was clearly uncomfortable, his work clothes replaced by a clean but simple shirt and trousers. He had attempted to tame his unruly hair, and Zara noticed with a start that he had trimmed his beard. The sight of him made her heart beat faster, even as she maintained a composed expression. Ahmad, her father said warmly, rising to greet him. These are my associates from Dubai. They're quite taken with what you've done with the gardens. Ahmad nodded politely, shaking hands with the man. Thank you, he said. It's been a pleasure to work on such a beautiful property. Show them the plans for the final water feature, her father urged, gesturing to the rolled up blueprints Ahmad carried under his arm. As Ahmad spread the plans on the dining table, explaining the intricate system of connecting pools and fountains that would complete the garden, Zara watched the faces of her father's guests. They were impressed, certainly, but there was something else in their expressions, a curiosity, an assessment, as if they were seeing something unexpected. You have quite an eye for design, one of the men commented. Where did you train? Ahmad hesitated, and Zara could see him weighing his response. I studied botany at the University of Jordan, he said, and then spent several years apprenticing with garden designers in various countries. But much of what I know comes from practical experience. And a natural talent, another guest added. These designs, they're not just functional, they're artistic, reminiscent of the great gardens of our history, but with a contemporary sensibility. Ahmad looked genuinely surprised at the praise. Thank you, he said simply. That's very kind. As the conversation continued, with the businessman asking increasingly specific questions about Ahmad's techniques and influences, Zara noticed a shift in her father's demeanor. He was watching Ahmad with a new interest, reassessing him perhaps, seeing him not just as an employee, but as someone with valuable skills and knowledge. After the guests had left, as Zara was helping her mother clear the last of the coffee cups, Her father called her into his study. Ahmad had already returned to his quarters, but his presence seemed to linger in the house, a disruption to the usual order of things. "Sit down, Zara," her father said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I want to talk to you about something." Zara's heart raced as she took the seat. Had her